Chairman, thank you, committee members. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Chloe Latham Sikes. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy at IDRA, and I'm testifying today in opposition to Senate Bill 3, respectfully. My job is to be an advocate for public education, and that includes advocating for a rigorous and comprehensive and thoughtful curriculum. But what I would like to share with you today in my time is my reflections as a graduate of Texas public schools. I attended Plano ISD from K through 12, and as I'm sure you all are well aware, Plano ISD has historically ranked on national lists and is considered a very high quality school district. But I graduated with a huge deficit in my knowledge. I made it through a top school district in our state without ever learning about some of the major historical figures and America's racial history. And that included details about the Chicano movement, about the Civil Rights Movement and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and frankly about many women who helped shape our country. I distinctly remember in 8th grade, actually, in U.S. history, writing on an exam that the cause for the Civil War was slavery and being marked down in my grade because the acceptable answer was states' rights. I knew that answer was not the full story, but that was the only story that was going to be allowed to be discussed in my classroom. Perhaps this was in part because in my entire K through 12 career in Plano ISD, I had one Black teacher and 2 Latina teachers, both who taught Spanish courses. We know how important it is for students to see themselves reflected in the curriculum, in their textbooks, and among their teachers. There's a lot of discussion about white students' anguish and learning the truthful racial history of our country, but what is embarrassing and psychologically disturbing to me as a white student who graduated from our schools is thinking you had a great education and then learning that the adults in charge didn't trust you with the truth. Our students are capable and they can be trusted with the truth, and our teachers should be equipped to mediate those critical conversations. I respectfully urge you to decline to support this bill. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for your testimony, and there may be some questions. Let me ask, and you obviously know the material well, and thank you for your articulate offering. And this is not a test. Have you had a chance to take a look at, I know I just mentioned it, but Chapter 113 of the Texas Administrative Code, and look at all those elements that are in the curriculum today? I think you'd be pleased. Again, you'll find as many references to Dr. King as to George Washington. You'll find eugenics and the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, difficult, horrible things that need to be taught. I'm not fussing at you, but if you haven't, I wish you'd take a look. I think you'd be pleased with what's in the curriculum today.
Yes, sir, and thank you for that. And that's something that we look at closely at IDRA and have done analysis on. And I have to say, I'm very pleased as a native of Texas that we've made great strides in our TEKS to be more inclusive in our curriculum and more thoughtful, including the reference that I made about how I was marked down in 8th grade history. And that said, I think our students can continue to be capable to learn the comprehensive history of the United States.
And is there anything in this bill, I certainly understand the concepts and the concern about critical race theory crowding out or forbidding difficult things, but I want to understand, you're a very sharp person. Anything in the bill, in this particular bill, that would keep those things from being taught? I'm not arguing. I really want to understand.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your question. Yes, our concerns are still standing with some of the eliminations of some of the changes that were made in House Bill 3979, from the regular session. Those additions to the TEKS of certain historical figures and events, we would like to have at least seen those maintained, as well as we are concerned about those prohibited concepts and students not being able to earn credit for actively engaging civically in their own civic society. Concerns are with those learning standards changes, but also with the concepts that we're afraid would really restrict the types of critical conversations that happen in the classroom that really broaden students' knowledge of themselves and their peers.
And the specific prohibitions, meaning the teaching that one race is superior to the other. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's the specific prohibitions are pretty narrow in the bill, right? I mean, what's actually forbidden is pretty narrow. And I'm not fussing at you. I want to understand. I trust your judgment. I see where you're coming from. Those things, the specific things that we're saying we're not going to teach, that one race is inherently superior to the other, that members of one race are inherently racist, are those, what do you think? Are those should we be teaching those particular teachings? I'd really like to know what you think.
Absolutely, and again, I really appreciate your questions, Chairman.
Minority.
As that is worded, we don't teach those. Many people do not teach those, and we certainly want to encourage inclusive, comprehensive, and thoughtful conversations in the classrooms to ensure all students of color and all students attending, including white students, feel safe in their learning environments. A safe learning environment needs to have those guided concepts. Our concern is with the broader language of that statute that is proposed in the bill that would restrict teachers' training to be thoughtfully equipped to mediate sensitive conversations in the classroom, and that does potentially offer a chilling effect for how those conversations might take place among students and teachers.
That's helpful. Thank you for that. Did you have questions, Senator Safrani? I didn't want to preempt you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, you heard Senator Hughes' explanation of his bill.
Yes, ma'am.
And he certainly listened to your testimony, and you reflect that gap that I keep talking about. You have these concerns. He thinks it's a great bill. What specifically in this bill, could you point to specific sections of this bill that worry you?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for that question. I'm sorry I closed my computer because I do have the bill language available for me. Specifically, and I believe it appears, the sections I know were slightly different from session 1, but section 4 regarding those prohibited concepts, 5, and that they extend to all K through 12. These are the concepts we were just discussing, and I believe that is beginning page 5, line 24, certain instructional requirements and prohibitions. First of all, that these concepts and prohibitions extend K through 12. I mean, these could, I know that the language could be read as narrow, but it could also be read and interpreted as quite broad to touch on a lot of topics that might come up in a classroom, particularly a classroom that's engaging a lot of diverse perspectives and trying to learn across students' experiences and backgrounds. That, in sharing those perspectives, that actually could be read, I believe, in violation of the bill, and that could really stem and suppress critical conversations in the classroom. I know that there's a whole list there, but that is one particular section. IDRA does share concerns with the entirety of the bill, but that is the primary section that I know we're discussing now.
Thank you. On page 6 of the bill, line 4, a teacher who chooses to discuss a topic described by subdivision 1 shall, to the best of the teacher's ability, strive to explore that topic from diverse and contending perspectives without giving deference to any one perspective. You are employed by the Intercultural Development Research Association, are you not?
Yes, ma'am.
As a representative of IDRA, of that organization, could you explain to me how that bill would impact a teacher who was trying to teach about, say, mass violence in Texas?
Teach about what topic?
Mass violence in Texas.
Yes, of course. For example, that example that you've just given, Senator Zaffarini, about mass violence, there are ways to teach about that in a holistic perspective of what has occurred. And one way that has been interpreted with the language of this bill of giving deference or not giving deference to one perspective is that it could minimize the tremendous violence and trauma and travesty that has been rendered by many of our historical events that are indications of mass violence. I know that we just marked another anniversary of the mass violent event in El Paso. And if that were erased or discussed in a broad way that watered down or diluted the significance of that event and what it means, as well as with, unfortunately, many events in our history, that really is compromising students' understanding of that historical event, what it meant, how it has shaped our society, and puts, in the reading of this bill as that is, potentially the teacher in jeopardy for how they've taught history and taught an event that cost lives. So yes, that is one example where we have concern.
How do you believe it would impact if you were trying to teach about slavery or the history of the Texas Rangers How would that language impact you as a teacher?
And I'll let some of my teacher colleagues speak to that, hopefully more in depth, who are here as well. I can speak again to my own experience as a student and as an educator that I've been in Texas classrooms. These are events that are horrible marks on our society and that we must speak of and continue to remember in a thoughtful way in order to actually address them. Something that we struggle with as an educational organization, and I know that many of you have struggled with this in your hearings, is year after year we hear about racial educational gaps, racial achievement gaps, opportunity gaps in students' learning, and racial disparities. If we do not acknowledge and clearly understand our racial history, including from slavery, from including the Texas Rangers, as you've just mentioned, including from the segregation of Mexican American students, and banning Spanish from the classroom, if we do not understand that as part of our educational history, we will never address the racial disparities in education we see today. We must take it holistically and face the truth as we've discussed to be able to face our most current issues.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. Any more questions? Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.